Hello, this is Father Rich. I'm here in my office in the rectory at Our Lady of Peace Church. We're here for the next masterpiece of our walk through the 75 Masterpieces Every Christian Should Know by Terry Glaspey. And I'm here in front of a holy water font that I was given. That is the image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I think part of the spirituality of the Sacred Heart devotion that came around in the 1800s, and really I think the Divine Mercy devotion built on, was this idea and that God wanting to reinforce that love and mercy of our God that is kind of captured in the Sacred Heart, and obviously the title Divine Mercy, that his love and mercy so much greater than what people maybe were over focused on, or the church at times even, which was more about the justice and the punishment, so to speak, kind of the fire and brimstone. So those two devotions really coming at a time to reinforce kind of this love of God and mercy that triumphs over sin and death, and that's greater than even justice, that goes beyond justice. But another kind of dynamic that's constantly a challenge in our spiritual life is between the immanence of God and the transcendence. I would say that the author, Terry Glaspey, of these 75 masterpieces, one theme among many of them is he picks masterpieces that make faith and make God real, kind of more down to earth, more tangible, a lot of reinforcement of God's presence in nature and those kind of things. So this next masterpiece is called The Head of Christ. It's a painting by a Frenchman, Rouault, which I'm mispronouncing, I know, it's French, but it's a painting he did in 1937. They talk about how many depictions of the face of Christ have been done. This is one, as you can see, a ceramic of the face of Christ that was given to me or to the parish a couple of years ago. And obviously more in the model of the Passion of Christ. But what the author mentions in this depiction, I'm going to kind of try to give that up to you a little closer, is again that it's not more of what they would describe as being kind of the distant, kind of more sacred art that was unrelatable, that maybe focused more on the transcendent, that people couldn't connect with. And this would be more of an emphasis on the immanent, right? Jesus, very human, very real. They talk about his eyes, kind of this idea that God is with us, that he's with us in our suffering. That was a major theme of this French artist, Rouault, that he was constantly depicting the degradation of humanity, really got fascinated with people that struggled with moral issues, prostitutes, and those who dealt with them, judges, and very real, down-to-earth people that you could even say were immersed in some of the sin of this world. But yet in the middle of that, his answer to that in his own spirituality, but also in his paintings, was the suffering of Christ, that Christ meets us in the suffering, he takes on our suffering. That's the love of God revealed, and he redeems the suffering. This idea that there's redemptive suffering. Interesting that I think he was about, he was born in 1871. So I think when he was about 35 years old or 40, he had went deeper in faith. And I don't know if he converted to Catholicism or just was Catholic, but really took it more seriously. But the rest of his life, he was a devoted Catholic. And that had a big influence on him. And interestingly enough, as he became more devout in his spiritual life, he felt more inclined. He would go down to, they say, the courthouses and see the prisons and see the people that were struggling with sin in their life, and he would draw them. And so more of his subjects, he moved more away from religious art for a little time and was focused more on the people struggling and suffering in this world. They do say that, later in his life, I think he lived for 70, 80 years, that he kind of came back to religious painting, and that was something throughout his history. But nonetheless, kind of this wanting to bring Christ and see Christ in those who are struggling even in sin, and that Christ is the answer in his suffering for us. So they kind of talk about some of the history of his paintings. He had a series that he did. Let's see here. Those religious paintings, the Child Christ Among the Doctors, 1894. That actually won a prestigious religious award for him at a young age. He had shown some interest in painting. He had actually done stained glass windows. So they really say the artist or the author of this chapter talks about how there's almost a stained glass window feel to many of his paintings. That because of that history that he worked on stained glass in his younger days. He went through several different schools of art in Paris, and obviously eventually became a very influential 19th century artist. They say kind of one of the probably more well-known religious artists of the 20th century. So they kind of talk about how, he kind of defied any religious category, or not religious, but artistic category, that he kind of had the combinations of different types of the time. He almost transcended them, if you will. So they say that his specifically religious paintings, such as the Head of Christ and Christ Mocked by the Soldiers, 1932, are his best known works. But again, some of the lesser known works were the very real pictures that he did of people and people that were struggling with the darkness and sin of this world. He went from doing a lot of watercolor to doing more oil painting in his later life, very vivid in those depictions. So, different approach, more kind of a combination of an old soul that he talked about, that he preferred, the Church of Cathedrals and kind of an old school religion, but yet still had the modern influence of art, brought that stuff together, and did a pretty powerful way of doing that. So that's our masterpiece. Thank you for joining me. Our next one will be number 50. We're reaching the 2/3 mark, 50 on our way to 75. The Power and the Glory, a novel by Graham Greene. So hope you'll join me for that. Have a great day and God bless.